Good movies are good for reputation, but when you need money, bad movies are just the way to go. That's why we're getting Trolls 3 right after Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and it's also why Disney broke its longtime tradition of not making sequels by making like 30 and 15 years while simultaneously changing animation forever with the Disney Renaissance. When you're not just breaking the mold, but shattering it with every movie you make, the finances, tend to add up. And when the VHS became a thing, the idea of the direct-to-home video was born. Now, while the money generated from these movies has helped pay for all the cool stuff Disney has done ever since, and, the not-so-cool stuff too, this wave of sequels to Disney's most popular movies had an unfortunate and unexpected side effect. The people who bought these movies actually had to watch them. And now I'm joining them, voluntarily. And so will you, hopefully voluntarily. So, let's embark on an adventure together and watch Disney struggle to find the balance between greed and dignity. Seatbelts, everyone.
Please let this be a normal field trip with a friend? No way!
Come on, monkey, little birdie, want to talk to monkey, have nice banana, woo-hoo-hoo-hoo.
Imagine just going to your local high school art show. You're not expecting a Da Vinci level painting, but it still doesn't make it less insulting whenever you get handed a 2-year-old's doodle of a giraffe and it's being auctioned off for $1 million. And honestly, that's kind of what this movie is, a 2-year-old's doodle of a giraffe. It just looks so ugly. What about it specifically that makes it look so bad? I don't really know, but it just feels so cheap. Other movies in this series have looked worse for sure, but you can't deny how lazy this all feels, especially since in the past, Disney has made some things that are ever so slightly way better. All of the colors are so diluted to the point where I genuinely wonder if someone accidentally dumped the entire film reel into a pool. It's at the same point where none of the characters even look like they did in the original. But I mean, I can't really blame Disney, because if I've learned anything from Illumination, it's that when you're making something for the sole purpose of bringing in cash, you don't have to care, and unsurprisingly, they don't. For all intents and purposes, this movie is just like a clickbait YouTube video, with big promises of something cool that are not at all delivered on the inside. Even the name, The Return of Jafar, is just referencing something else that people like. It starts with Arabian Night again. I'm not stupid. I mean, they weren't really trying to trick anyone, but still, the whole thing is just a flashing arrow sign directing you to the shelf at your local Blockbuster or whatever to make you buy the VHS. And once you've paid, who cares what happens after that? Could you even buy movies at Blockbuster or just rent them? I'm too young for this. I don't know, never mind. I think that's why every aspect of this movie just gives off a vibe of not even being bothered. Animation is just one part. Name anything, and there's probably an issue. And since that's kind of why I'm here and I don't want to waste time on this video, I'm just gonna enter list mode. Most segments won't be this long, but the ones I hate the most will be longer. I guess it would make sense to start off by mentioning Iago is the main character in this one. Whose idea was that? He isn't really that interesting to watch, and they really want us to care about how he's doing his own thing now, because Jafar always bullied him, and it works well enough, I guess, although they definitely shouldn't have forgiven him as many times as they did. To no one's shock, the other characters are equally bad or worse, because Disney broke their contract with Robin Williams because money. Now they couldn't get him to do the sequel they wanted to make, also because money. So, who voices the genie now? Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson voices the genie. Even though in my Renaissance video, I mentioned that I didn't love the genie as much as most people do, he's still totally preferable to whatever this is. I mean, this guy barely even feels like a character. If the original genie was occasionally mildly aggravating, this genie makes me want to swallow one of those do-not-eat packets that they put in the bottom of plastic containers to suck up all the moisture. And this is an issue for every single one of the characters. None of them even feel like real people, let alone the characters that they were in the last movie. At the end, they think Iago is dead. And when they find out he's alive, do you know what Aladdin's reaction is?
All right!
Really? All right? That's the best you idiots could come up with? Speaking of which, the movie's unexpectedly cheesy.
It must have cost a fortune.
Oh no, it was a steal.
I think Jasmine is a perfect example of just feeling like a totally different person. Her whole thing was that she was adamant about her own agency. Obviously not dumping on that, because that's a totally logical thing to be adamant about when you are denied it. But now she's married, and since she doesn't have to worry about what choice she wants to make in that specific area, she just completely gave up on wanting to have a say in anything. The only time in the movie where she isn't acting like a marshmallow, which is decidedly not how she acted in the first movie, is when she gets temporarily mad at Aladdin like 20 minutes in for a reason that doesn't even make any sense and that gets resolved instantly, but don't fret, we'll get to that soon enough. And of course, Aladdin himself isn't exempt from criticism either. My biggest issue, honestly, is that if he's a prince now, why is he not a prince now? He's still disbanding groups of thieves by himself without any guards at all. Do you not get any perks for being the Sultan's daughter's fiancé or whatever? In other words, why are you still wearing peasant clothes if you have a bajillion dollars? Although I do think it's kind of funny that he pulled a Mansa Musa and just threw gold out onto the streets and destroyed the entire economy with crippling inflation. If I'm being honest, I think the only character I don't have an issue with is the new one, Abi Small. Yeah, that's his name. He's honestly so fun to watch because he's the most NPC-ish, complete joke character I've ever seen, and it just makes him so much better than anyone else. You never know what he's gonna do. But as dumb as the characters are, the plot is even worse. It happens only like half of the way through the movie, but there's a stupid liar revealed plot, and I hate those so much. They're so annoying, and I'm pretty sure that this is the first one of the series, maybe? Took 9 episodes, but we got there. Like, it has the whole I thought you changed mine and everything, the whole shebang. And of course, it gets resolved with a song, and Jasmine goes back to being a doormat again, just like they originally intended, right? But the liar revealed trope isn't actually what makes the plot so bad. No. That honor goes to the most hilariously stupid plot device I've seen since at least the last video. In this movie, Aladdin is framed for the Sultan's assassination. And Jafar walks in disguised as Jasmine and says all of this.
I thought you loved me, but now I see that all you wanted to do was rule Agrabah.
I never wanted.
He shall die at dawn for the murder of my father.
What? This movie goes below Snow White and above Rackadoodle. Its cheesiness drops at quite a few spots. The whole thing feels like some sort of parody or fan fiction, and having watched the original, like most people who've stumbled into experiencing this horror show, it's actually kind of offensive how much they thought they could get away with here. It's a good thing the movie's only nice minutes long, and it goes by pretty fast. Even though they obviously didn't care about making this movie good, it wasn't awful. I mean, it was still bad, but it wasn't awful. I have a feeling that in the future, maybe not in this video, maybe in this video, we'll see some situations where the not caring attitude does make it awful, but, you know, we haven't gotten there yet, and once I adjusted my expectations appropriately, I was less mad and more just disappointed, which is a very familiar feeling that I am not at all surprised to be feeling. At the end of the day, we got the scene where Iago deep throats a pool ball, and now there's only one more Aladdin movie to watch, so I guess it's not a complete loss.
Can I put my balls in your jaws? Your jaws. Balls in your jaws.
No, Aladdin, I am your father.
The blinds in my room are like crinkling. It would be smart to wait until later, but I'm not gonna do that. Anyway, I have a feeling that Aladdin and the King of Thieves is one of those movies that grows on you over time, and I can kind of feel that starting already. My expectations weren't even that low for this movie, and I still came out pleasantly surprised. It actually tries to be a real movie way more than The Return of Jafar did, which has the nice side effect of being infinitely less painful to watch. The songs are still far from being on the level of the real movies that they were making simultaneously, but they're definitely better, and although they don't follow the categories, it's not always necessary. I mean, they'd still totally be better if there were I Want songs and stuff, but I don't even know how that would work for sequels anyway, so I don't really see a point in criticizing why the songs are where they are, just how they sound, which is mediocre. Also, this movie looks so much nicer. It's just so much more vibrant. I'm still not exactly sure what they did to desaturate the whole of the last movie, but whatever it was, they fixed it here. And they genuinely tried on some of these shots. The challenge scene is actually really well made. There are parts in it where everything is flooded with red and blue lights, and I think that is cool. And they went so hard on this island rising out of the water shot, which they totally did not have to do for a movie that is, like all of the ones in this video, solely for dollar bills, y'all. That's really hard to say, wow. Another thing that I appreciate is the fact that Aladdin and Jasmine are finally getting married. It turns out they weren't actually married in the last one. I think they might have fixed Aladdin too, and you can kind of believe that this is the same guy that we originally knew, which is to say absolutely nothing like whatever he was during that brief fanfiction intermission, except for Jasmine, who still doesn't act or even look anything like she used to. All of the characters are kind of back to being and acting like they used to as well, and the biggest example of that is the genie. I am so unbelievably happy that Disney got over their ego and apologized to Robin Williams, because he's back now, and I couldn't be happier. So, TLDR, Robin Williams agreed to play the genie in the first movie if Disney didn't use his name to, like, sell the movie. There was more to it than that, but it doesn't really matter because Disney proceeded to make posters that looked like this, which was just a total breach of the contract. So Robin Williams said that unless Disney apologized, he wouldn't work for them anymore. For a while, they were too damn petty to just say sorry, even trying to bribe him with, a true story, a Pablo Picasso painting. But I guess they finally decided that a good Aladdin movie, or just an Aladdin movie, kinda needed the actor who made the whole thing work in the first place, and now here he is, ready to bless us with his presence once more. He's not as good as he is in the original, of course, partly because his impressions have amped up a lot more, and it gets a bit annoying. I mean, Elvis and Forrest Gump are canonically in this movie. Like, are you kidding me right now? However, so is Mrs. Doubtfire, which officially redeems all genie-related issues in the movie, and even if she wasn't there, I'd take a mildly overzealous Robin Williams over Homer Simpson 11 times out of 10. It's just occurred to me that I haven't actually mentioned the Thieves yet. Spoilers, I guess, but Aladdin finds out that his dad is alive and is the head of this terrorist group called the 40 Thieves. Now, bringing the long-lost parent into the equation is a tried-and-true sequel trope, and even though it's kind of gimmicky, that's better than doing your own thing when that thing is bad. And I mean, just because it's a trope doesn't mean it can't work. They're tropes for a reason. I don't love the second How to Train Your Dragon, but the mom reuniting with the dad and the mom reuniting with Hiccup and the other stuff that happens after is my favorite part of that movie. And combining it with the secret organization trope gives me serotonin because it reminds me of other things that I like very much, which I'm sure you could guess just by looking at the name of my channel. The other stuff with the Thieves is actually okay. I thought the Oracle was going to be really cheesy, which I think is a reasonable thing to assume about a magic scepter that summons an ancient omniscient deity to answer one and only one of your deepest and darkest questions, but that was fine too. The dad is a solid character, and he has some amount of development. He always captures your attention at least, and I think they fleshed him out a decent amount. If I'm being honest, the weakest link in this movie in terms of characters is The Rock, aka the villain in this movie. And no, I don't mean like The Rock, I mean a guy who looks like he was carved out of a giant stone. He doesn't have any traits, but he does have a solid motivation that we don't have to learn about through flashbacks but actually get to see in real time. He's not even that bad though, and if this is as bad as the characters get, I think you can understand why this movie is just better. Sadly, it's not perfect. I don't think anyone was expecting that, but if you were, sorry to burst your bubble, I guess. I couldn't care less about Aladdin introducing his dad to Jasmine and the Sultan and them not liking him and immediately arresting him, and then Aladdin breaking him out of jail and becoming a fugitive for 5 minutes before immediately being forgiven. It all happened so fast and so slowly all at once. This one is 20 minutes longer than The Return of Jafar, and I think it was all added here because you can definitely feel it. With that being said though, the climax might have been the best part of the movie. Aladdin has to go rescue his dad again because The Rock took over the 40 Thieves and then kidnapped him when he got there, and then they used him to find a city that sits on the back of a giant turtle that holds the hand of Midas, which can turn anything to gold. I know, it's kind of stupid, but just listen. When they get there, it starts to go back underwater and begins flooding at a very inconvenient time, and then a giant fight breaks out, ending exactly like you think. The weird thing is, that's exactly what happens in National Treasure 2, except instead of a gold hand within a city, the city itself is the gold. Point is, even though this is a totally ridiculous idea that doesn't fit at all with anything we know about this universe, it's just fun, and I'm kinda glad the movie ended like this. I'll put it below Frosty the Snowman and above The Rescuers Down Under. I think at this point we've all realized that we can just exclude the Christmas movies from the ranking because of how short they are, and it just messes up the whole idea. You can consider it to be next to Anastasia, and it really is like Anastasia in a lot of ways. Surprisingly good, with only a few things holding it back from being genuinely more than good. This one is so much less in-your-face awful than the last one, and all of the small improvements here and there add up a lot more than you'd think and make everything so much less miserable. This movie doesn't get a thumbs up, but it doesn't get a thumbs down. It just gets a thumb sideways, and probably leaning towards up if I'm being honest. I mean, it ends with the merchant guy singing a different version of Arabian Nights set to Aladdin's wedding, and that feels more right than I ever could have hoped for this movie. Fair play, sir, or sirs, I assume there was more than one of you. But there is kind of an issue that comes along with this. This movie wasn't too offensive, but now it's anything goes. I think before they were still a bit reserved about completely selling out, but it's only the mid-90s and the sequel train has only just pulled out of the station. Let's just say that that train is about to fall off a bridge, and any semblance of shame that Disney had left is as good as gone now. I mean, there's 6 movies left in this video, and only 3 more years. As soon as that last pedal falls, I am near certain that the rest of these sequels are doomed to be decreased forever. Get it? Because they decrease in quality.
Merry Crisis!
I'm gonna say something super controversial. Cancel me if you want, but it needs to be said. I don't like the Beauty and the Beast sequels, and I think the reason why is because I like the original the most. Like, if you make a bad Aladdin sequel, I don't particularly care, but if you make a bad sequel to a movie I watched at least 60 times a year from ages 1 to 6, then we're gonna have to throw hands. And yet, Disney made more sequels to it in 3 years, a mere 1,000 days, than they did to any other of their movies ever. They made 2 sequels to quite a few, but 3 is unheard of. And even worse, none of these are even sequels. They're betweenquels that take place after Belle got to the castle and before the Beast turns back into a human. And let me tell you, Disney milks that short little time for all it's worth. And to make it even worse, this one is a Christmas special, which is sure to add in all sorts of disgusting things. Actually, that very thing shows Disney's abrupt turn to the dark side very well. After all, what screams "quality is for losers, give me your money" more than throwing Christmas into the mix to bring in sweet, sweet cash? This is kinda obvious, but the whole thing is totally meant to pander to idiots like me with nostalgia for the original, and okay, yes, it kind of works when it's not making me cringe.
I fell and I landed on the ice.
But seriously, the Christmas stuff really messes with me. Like, even though the movie contains a small concentration of okay things, I can't enjoy things like this nice opening shot panning to the castle, and I immediately get whiplash from Sure, every so often something remotely okay will happen, but then you'll get a "Christmas is the most magical time of year," or a "but it's Christmas, a time of joy," or a "remember when life was really good and we would do X, Y, and Z on Christmas," or maybe a lengthy explanation of every aspect of the morning of Christmas, or dare I say, even a "maybe the real Christmas was the friends we made along the way," and it makes everything so long. Well, there's gotta be parts of the movie that aren't Christmas, right? I mean, you drive a hard bargain, but I'll try my best. The animation is still good, but it's also different. I was expecting the castle to look way worse, but it looks fine. The organ doesn't, but put a pin in that for now. It's the characters that all look off. And of course, the songs are still awful, and the lyrics to the one the organ sings to the Beast are actually so bad that I'm tempted to add it to my playlist. Also, Belle isn't Paige O'Hara anymore, and that's annoying, and the Beast isn't whoever played the Beast anymore, and that's annoying, so I can't really care, and it actually messes up like 90% of whatever nostalgia bait they had going for them. Neither of them even feel like the same people anymore, and that's probably for the best, because now the movie is so bad and so unlike the original that it can't possibly ruin my childhood, because I can barely even consider it to be in the same universe. Okay, I had to come back and edit in and say that they actually are the same actors, but they sound nothing like they used to, so don't blame me for thinking that, okay? All of the side characters are still fine, but they never really even show up. Lumiere and Cogsworth, the two best obviously, have a combined 3 minutes of screen time, and Chip is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum where he's never off screen. We also get a new Axe character who is definitely Jewish and is definitely an excellent representation of all Jews and is definitely not insensitive in the slightest. And okay, I guess we have to talk about the organ guy now. Firstly, he's really ugly. Okay, you can see that. Let's move on. And secondly, he's so unbelievably not self-aware. He doesn't want to be human again because he thinks the Beast needs his melodies to, quote, feed his tormented soul. Not realizing that if you sabotage Belle's and the Beast's relationship to stay as an organ, you will die. Yes, you will be dead. Also, apparently the organ is Drake from The Pebble and the Penguin, and that's a weird coincidence. The only thing good about his existence is his sidekick. Thank God that the worst villains always have fun sidekicks. And may I say, this Piccolo brings a smile to my heart. That can't be the right expression, can it? I mean, hearts can't smile. Wait, the Piccolo is played by Pee Wee Herman? What the hell is going on with this movie's actors? Anyway, while the Beast is getting his tormented soul fed or whatever, Wikipedia says that this is mind control, but I'm not even gonna get into that can of worms. Belle is running around like a chicken with its head chopped off, trying to cheer up the Beast by decorating the castle for Christmas. That's just what the first half of the movie is. And even though it's agonizingly boring, it's still preferable to the second half, which is just borderline psychotic. So Belle doesn't like any of the trees on the castle grounds and decides to go deep into the forest to find one that's just right, because it went so well the last time it was night and you went into the forest alone. Remember? It was like 2 weeks ago, so she almost drowns somehow, and the Beast goes out of his way to save her yet again. He takes her back to the castle, makes sure she's nice and healthy, and promptly locks her in the dungeon forever. I'm sorry. When you guys fell in love and got married, you never mentioned that he uttered the words, "You will rot in this dungeon forever." A third act breakup was to be expected, but this is just beyond insanity. Blah blah blah, 5-second reconciliation after he finally opens the present Belle gave him, learns the true meaning of Christmas, which... fine. And then the climax of the movie is the organ playing so aggressively that he almost implodes the castle, utilizing a zoom effect in one of the funniest ways I've ever seen in any movie ever. I did not edit this at all.
They can't fall in love if they're dead.
Why is he diagonal? So they sentence the organ to execution by firing squad, and he literally just dies and the movie's over. Let's put it below An American Tail and above Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's a pretty sparsely populated area of the list, but it really is that bad. The Christmas thing honestly is the biggest issue by a country mile, and unfortunately, it's so intrinsically tied to the plot of this movie that you can't delete it without deleting the entire thing, which I personally would be fine with, by the way. Whatever. One Beauty and the Beast sequel down, 2 to go. On to 1998, we're like halfway done.
There's no such thing as magic.
Wow, that really is the most direct-to-home video title, isn't it? As we get deeper and deeper into the bowels of Beauty and the Beast betweenquels, the B of B and BB, if you will, the less time I want to spend talking about them, because less stuff happens in them, and I'd basically just be reiterating movie bad over and over again. So I'm just gonna say movie bad now, and briefly go through why this movie is ever so slightly less awful than the last one. Although, unlike The King of Thieves, this one is bound to insult me more and more as time goes on. First and foremost, this one isn't exactly a movie. This one's made of 4 shorts, and yeah, it does kind of give me Vietnam flashbacks to episode 2, which you absolutely should not watch, by the way, but it does do a nice job of breaking up the insanity. Instead of sitting through one long, disgusting storyline, I'm sitting through 4 shorter, and therefore less disgusting storylines. I mean, instead of force-feeding me cyanide, they also sprinkled in some arsenic, and some nightshade, and some strychnine to mix things up, and I do think that was legitimately the right choice for this movie. The first one is about forgiveness, and the disagreement that starts it all starts in just the stupidest way. The Beast invites Belle to lunch and is really nervous about messing up, and so in a completely rational frame of mind, he throws this book guy across the dining room and damn near kills him. Then he gets shocked when Belle is upset and adamantly refuses to apologize, even going so far as to demand an apology from her. Then a forgery gets added into the mix, and then there's a temporary exile, and it just goes back and forth and never seems to end. This one is by far the worst. Luckily, that means it gets better as it goes along, and sure enough, the second one is probably my favorite. Belle is helping Lumiere with his anniversary of his first date with the Feather Duster, but then the Feather Duster thinks Belle and Lumiere are having an affair. Yes, an affair! I don't know how she thinks that's gonna work, but the idea is so absurd that the whole thing becomes so much more interesting. But what makes it even funnier is that she starts trying to screw Cogsworth in retaliation, and then somehow they both fall into a ravine, and it's just a good time. But it does get a few points off for assuming that French people have the capacity to be, like, good. The third one kind of resembles the Christmas special because everyone is trying to throw a party for Mrs. Potts because she has chronic depression, because of her early onset dementia, and I'm only half kidding about all of that, and it all goes terribly, and there's a whole "I'm afraid the celebration is cancelled" thingy. I guess this one is about working together, partly because every so often Belle just straight up tells all the characters that they need to work together. The best part was the fight between the oven mitts that turned into a full civil war about whether the cake should be angel's food or devil's food, and it's still the second best. And the fourth one. Initially, I thought there were only 3 shorts in this movie, so by the time I got to the fourth one, I was kinda fed up with watching it. The only thing of note in this one is that the Beast is back, which is annoying, but he falls down the stairs and breaks his neck trying to chase this bird out of the castle, which is really funny. I think one of the big reasons that the shorts in this movie with the Beast suck so much is because of his voice. He's got to have a different voice actor this time, because he sounds literally nothing like he did.
I'm so happy you came.
What the hell?
Okay, editing me is back to say that it's still the same guy, again, so I think the only conclusion we can draw now is that he's literally not even trying anymore. There's no growl. He just sounds like some random white dude named Kyle. In other news, the animation is still okay, maybe a bit worse, and the way the characters are drawn is really just unpleasant. Some of the shorts end with a non-diegetic song sung by Belle, and they're all bad, obviously. Honestly, even if this movie did everything right, which it doesn't, it still just wouldn't work. The real problem with all of these intermediate love stories is something that can't be fixed. The original dynamic established by the first movie works best without additional layers added on. The more complicated breakups and back-togethers that happen, the dumber things get. Now, Belle doesn't love the Beast because he saved her life and put himself in danger for her. Now she loves him because he let her decorate the castle for Christmas, and because he finally caved and apologized to her after he abused the elderly. It's probably a good thing that the middle two shorts don't even involve the Beast, because the more in-between stuff we get, the worse things get. As it is though, I'll put it below Melody Time and above Saludos Amigos. Those two movies have been together for a long time, but no longer. Kinda cool that these movies are so reliably bad that we can do that. Well, fear not, because I don't think anything's more certain than the placement of this next movie. Okay, looking ahead, I might be wrong. That's a bit weird, huh? It blows me away that they chose to make a sequel to Pocahontas before Mulan or The Little Mermaid or, I don't know, The Lion King, and those are just 3 examples. If you're trying to scam people and bring in a bunch of clickbait money, make sure you're doing it with something people actually like, so it actually works. But this is literally the one Renaissance movie that everyone doesn't like. They can't even make bad movies correctly. And what makes it even more perplexing is that they actually made this movie good. I'm not kidding. The animation is actually really awesome, the character designs are all really crisp and even look like they did in the original, and the backgrounds and the lighting and the shadows all feel like they had effort put into them. It looks like a Renaissance movie, and you know what? I'd even say that some parts look better than the original, except maybe the ships because they're made of CGI and kind of look like they're from Jake and the Neverland Pirates. The songs are better, except for the one Pocahontas sings at the beginning that's so full of random buzzwords that I didn't even know what she was saying, and the pacing is pretty decent too. The first 20 minutes are kind of just building up to London, but that's probably the only slow part of the movie. The only logistic issue, I don't know what other word to use, with this movie is probably that sometimes the voices don't match up with the lips.
But your majesty, you don't need him to confirm what I've already told you.
And this is kind of a tangent, but apparently Pocahontas can just speak English now. When did she learn English? I mean, it makes things way easier, but there's no nature magic to help her in London, so I guess she just taught herself? How convenient, and doubly convenient that she taught all of the others too. There's still a bit of that racism we've come to expect. I could be wrong, but I don't think the Powhatan tribe ever painted themselves to look like birch trees as some sort of camouflage, but for the most part, I was actually surprised at how little racism this movie had, especially since Pocahontas spent the better part of this movie in the Queen's domain, for God's sake. They made a few tasteless jokes at the expense of the best character, this guy, but except for one specific individual, there wasn't anything more extreme than a few gasps here and there. When things eventually escalate, it feels like it's actually contributing to a theme that makes sense, like, gee, I don't know, don't be racist, which is a very big step forward from the last movie, which kinda just fumbled around and said, either side could be right, I don't know. We also meet the new character, John Rolfe, and he's honestly very well thought out. He's kind of misogynistic at first, but they use that to actually prove a point and have a message, just like they did with the racism aspects. He learns why he's wrong and ends up becoming the second best character. Sorry, John, but this guy's still the best. Still though, he makes some good jokes, and he's not a pretentious dingus like I was expecting, given that he's from across the pond. Speaking of the pond, once they got to London, I was expecting the rest of the movie to be a bunch of senseless Londoning, followed by 10 minutes of actual story, and then the end. But a lot of actual stuff happens in like 70 minutes. The idea of Pocahontas having to fit in properly at this ball, or else the king will send an armada to like wipe out her tribe or something, is kind of stupid, but it provides some stakes. They even had a great spot to shove in a liar revealed trope, and chose not to. I'm pretty sure John Rolfe forgot to tell Pocahontas the consequences of messing up, and I was worried that was intentional and there's gonna be a stupid third act breakup or whatever, but there wasn't even that. I mean, wow. But wait, Pocahontas? A guy named John? Not the John I know. Where is John Smith, you may ask? Well, for half the movie they insist that John Smith is dead to the point where I almost believed it, but like, I mean, no matter how good this movie is, they were never gonna do that. But then he comes back, and isn't even annoying like he was in the last one. They played into the love triangle thing only long enough for John 1 to just fully accept that Pocahontas loves John 2 now, and then the two Johns are just best buds. No tropes there at all. Disney retroactively fixed the stupidest part about the last movie in a direct-to-home video sequel. Did this movie really just dodge every single bullet? Back to the John Smith thing though, why did Disney give him a fake-out death in the first 2 minutes of the movie? Well, that has to do with Ratcliffe's evil plan. That's right everyone, Ratcliffe is back. He's technically the main villain, but he doesn't show up that often. He's still totally ridiculous though, but it isn't as bad here because his spitefulness totally fits with everything else he does. He wants to sabotage the ball so Pocahontas messes up so he can send an armada? Yeah, he's petty and spiteful. He fails, and so he tries to just start the armada anyway? Well, sure. He's petty and spiteful. He hasn't hit that subscribe button yet? You guessed it, he's just petty and spiteful. Don't be like Ratcliffe, folks. Hit that subscribe button. Maybe I should cut that out. This one goes below Sleeping Beauty and above Rudolph. Yeah, actually that high. Although it's probably just expectation versus reality skewing things again. It's just really well paced, and it honestly flew by. It felt like I was watching a real movie, and more so than when I was watching the original. Unlike the other sequels we've seen today, I feel like an equal amount of work was put out into this movie and the original movie, if not more here. The only difference is that this one doesn't have creepy men grooming 12-year-olds, and that makes this the most pleasantly surprising sequel yet. Alright, on to the Lion King one. I am so scared.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
What do you mean you've seen this? It's brand new.
Okay, this movie is unironically brilliant. Not in the sense that it's a great movie, because it isn't, but in the sense that it absolutely should be awful, and also isn't, because everything about this movie was stolen from somewhere else. I'm dead serious. For the first 45 minutes, The Lion King 2 is just The Lion King 1, 2. They're the same movie. The plots are identical. I mean, does this sound familiar to you?
Kiara, what did...
Since Scar's dead, he can't be the bad guy again, so instead, the villain is the head of this group of Scar sympathizers who were exiled from the Pride Lands and want to take it back. On its own, that isn't really indicative of reusing ideas, but when you look at the entire package, you start to see the similarities. This new villain is Scar, her children are the hyenas, and they all do the exact same thing. They have a plan to kill the leader, and it's to start a stampede of horned animals that puts his child in danger, which will allow them to take over. I'm not the smartest, but ain't that just the first movie again? Granted, the plot does begin to deviate from the first movies after the stampede, and to understand that, we need to talk about Kovu. Kovu is the main villain lady's son, and he's been handpicked to overthrow Simba and be the next king. Instead of the stampede being to kill Simba, even though that would have been way easier and had worked before, the idea is instead for Kovu to save Simba's daughter, Kiara, from the stampede and ask for sanctuary at Pride Rock, and then he'll kill Simba. But that doesn't mean the story becomes remotely original. The rest of the movie instead relies on every cliche and trope you've ever heard of to move the story along. Let me just explain the rest of it to you. From a young age, his sense of morality was corrupted, but eventually he falls in love with Kiara and learns that what he was sent to do isn't right. He begins to struggle with what to do after a very funny and maybe a bit romantic escapade with Kiara, even having fun for the first time. We know this, of course, because he audibly says the word fun.
Fun?
As everyone does when they have fun. But then Simba goes on a walk with him straight into the territory he knew the villains lived, and when they try to kill Simba, he immediately thinks Kovu betrayed him. Oh no, the liar has been revealed. Luckily, he saves the day and is welcomed back with open arms where they all live happily ever after. Do I even need to say anything? I could have written that. I did write that actually, while I was watching the movie before any of it happened, just as a complete guess that was totally right. But hold on a second. I said this movie should be awful but isn't. We're all on the same page about the first part now, I hope. But what about the second part? How is this movie good exactly? Well, first off, even though this is all pandering and clickbait of the highest order, it's still probably preferable to something new that totally doesn't work. That's why tropes are tropes after all. They're easy to add, and even easier when you don't care. But that's the second thing. Disney does care. They cared about every single part of this movie, just like they did about the last movie, and just like they did about King of Thieves as well. Up until now, the animation has either been way worse than the original or just as good, but here, it's actually a little bit better. It's just as beautiful as the last one, and some of the landscapes feel even more detailed. The shadows are more pronounced, and the character designs feel more alive. Just look at their eyes. Although nothing is gonna match the originals, the songs are okay too, and one actually comes back in the background over and over, and gets stuck in my head sometimes, somehow, just like in the original. All of the characters still act the way they used to, and that's one of the movie's biggest W's. I was expecting Timon and Pumbaa to lean a bit too far over the cliff and fall into genie territory, but they still thread that needle of making stupid jokes without being too cringy. They're less prominent in this movie, but that's also better than them being forced into a story that honestly has very little to do with them. Simba's honestly a good character here too. He's really overprotective of his daughter and doesn't want her to get hurt, and given everything that's ever happened to him, that's totally understandable. And while Kiara herself is also really solid, no one can be compared to Kovu. Yes, he's a character that's been written 1,000 times, but you still can't help but like him and kind of feel bad for him. Quite a bit of this movie isn't great, but there are a lot of good parts, like when Tiara and Kovu are looking at the stars and she's telling him about the great kings of the past, and we get this.
Do you think Scar's up there?
And then towards the end, Kovu's brother gets killed, and that was something new that I didn't hate at all. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. This movie may have been entirely built on the fabric of stuff other people have done, but at the same time, you can tell that people tried to adapt them and make new things every so often too. And by the end, we're left with a decent movie about forgiveness that we absolutely did not start with. Somehow, we're left with characters like Kovu, who are the farthest from creative you could possibly get, but are still genuinely good. Somehow, Disney used every possible formula infamous for making terrible movies, and used them all to the best of their ability to make something that's not just good, but feels like an actual enjoyable continuation of the first movie. I'm gonna put it below Anastasia and above Frosty the Snowman, which is basically above King of Thieves because Frosty barely counts. It's definitely closer to Anastasia, but I just like Anastasia more, and somehow I also like Pocahontas 2 more. Should I be allowed to have opinions? Doesn't matter. This movie is still a masterclass in showing how to get rid of half of the effort required to make a movie, and as long as you know what to do with the other half, everything can still work out. Sadly though, as the concentration of these sequels goes up, which it will when Disney sees that it's working, they'll inevitably realize that the good half of the effort doesn't necessarily have to be replicated, or honestly, even the bad half. One of these days, they'll realize they don't have to try. The sequel train has been hoisted up back out of the ravine, but there's an even bigger one ahead. Or maybe there won't. I have unfortunate news to share. Belle's Tales of Friendship and Hercules Zero to Hero are nowhere. They are completely vanished. They're not on Disney Plus, they're not on Netflix, there's no place I can pirate them, they're literally gone. Belle's Tales of Friendship I'm not so sad about because it's live action, or at least part of it is. Hercules Zero to Hero is just 3 random episodes from the Hercules TV show, so I'm not super upset about that one either, but still, it's kind of annoying. Maybe one day I'll find them, but apparently today's not that day. This is kind of underwhelming of a way to end the episode, but like, I don't know, I guess we are ending things off with The Lion King 2, a surprisingly positive note, and honestly, that kinda sums up this video. You may have noticed that I kept waiting for it to get really bad, saying that it would, and it never did. Maybe the key was in the 2 vanished movies, or more likely, it's yet to come. We still have like 20 plus sequels to do. Whatever the case, we'll get to pick this journey back up in a few episodes. For now, let's go back to some good movies, which do exist, although recently it's been hard to remember that. I already said this in the last episode, but while Don Bluth and Disney have been experimenting, so have some other companies. After all, this is the decade where animation was transformed, and with the advent of a new type of animation, 2 companies you definitely know about were created, DreamWorks and Pixar. One born of love and one born of hate, but they've both made absolute banger movies. Combined, they only made 5 in the 90s, but it'll be a nice break before we jump back into the trenches. For now, say goodbye to the wonderful world of Disney sequels, and say hello to the new frontier of fully computer-generated animated movies. CGI Kingdom, here we come.